Peggy Lopez, it's my honor to speak to you. Talk to me.
Thank you, Egberto. I was going to try to get a hold of you at 4 o'clock this morning, but that's way too early for me to talk because you guys had invited me to come back and talk again about the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And I just came in and you're here, so I thought I would call you right now and give you another little piece because I think people may not understand me when I just make little statements about it. And I need to begin with the basic, simplest form of the patriarchy is the family with a husband, a wife, and children. The husband owns the wife and the children. Over 2,000 years ago, that patriarchal husband could kill the wife and it was meaningless. Then from there, it went to common law, like in England, where the rule of thumb, you could beat your wife, but not with a stick any thicker than your thumb. And it wasn't until 1990, I don't know if it was 4 or 6, that it actually became a real crime for a husband to harm his wife, where it was codified in the Violence Against Women's Act. And that was about domestic violence. So even in this country, they brought the rule of thumb with them from England, and it wasn't until 1994 that women were actually legally protected from their husbands beating them or harming them. And so that kind of a historical reality is built into the structures that we live in every day. Now, the man who is the husband in the family is not the ultimate patriarch, because the man goes to work, works for a man who is his patriarch. And there's a real class structure within the patriarchy. And then whoever owns the business is actually the patriarch over the business. It has minor managers and bosses, but they're just minor patriarchs, and they're not the ultimate until they go home to their family where they are the ultimate. And when I'm analyzing what's going on in the world today, this has been my basis of analysis since I was a teenager.
Let me tell you something, and I read somewhere else, and I can't remember where, that right now we are having that big fight, and the patriarchy is fighting like hell to try to survive what has been an arcane system for a long time. And you brought it back to America here. I think it wasn't until the 60s that women could even open a bank account on their own. Is that right? Right here in the United States.
I think it was in the 70s.
In the 70s. Okay. So this was codified for a long time that we had something that needs to break. And I tell you what, we hope that Kamala Harris can break it, because right now, Donald Trump, the reason he has Latino male support and a black male support and other male support is he's playing on that game for that small faction of all these different groups that do that believe in that.
And it's not ridiculous. It's still with us. It's in the hierarchy of our businesses. There was a woman who ran for president, Sonia Johnson. She wrote a book called From Housewife to Heretic. If you want to figure out how to break out of the patriarchal bonds that holds every single one of us, it's a good book to read, because she talks about having come up against it. She lost her kids, she lost her family, she lost her community, she lost her home. She lost everything because she spoke out as a perfectly conditioned patriarchal wife. She spoke out in favor of the ERA. They excommunicated her from her life. And she wrote about what that was like and every piece of her life that fell apart because of that. When I hear people who were in the Paradise Fire up here and they lost their homes and their pets and their historical mementos of their life, they sound a lot like that. And I think the reason that they've started with getting rid of Roe is because they can't figure out how to directly go back and make women their property. So what they've done is they've turned the women's bodies into the property of the state. And if Trump wins, then he will figure out a way to make it women's bodies the property of the United States. And from there, it's just this horrific stuff that I'm looking at. And simultaneous to that, Kamala Harris is a woman who has broken almost every bond of the patriarchy that has been tried to be put upon her. And in that process, she knows how to stand toe-to-toe with the patriarch and say, you are nothing but my equal. and they don't know how to deal with that.
And you know what? And I think like I mentioned on KPFT on the earlier show, I think it was a couple days ago when I did a piece on white women, because right now the only thing that keeping the patriarchy politically alive is in fact white women, right? And we have the woman from.
It has a.
Go ahead, please. Continue.
What keeps it alive? There's a. You know how a house has bones, and our social structure has bones. The every business that you go to has a similar bones, has a similar hierarchy, and that is the bones of patriarchy. We have stopped completely fighting the patriarchy. Back in the 70s, there was like a conscious decision. Sonia Johnson put forth this theory that as long as we fight against the patriarchy, we are going to lose and they're going to get stronger. What we need to do is quit fighting the patriarchy. We need to come together and fight racism and sexism and homophobia and every single one of those tenets of the patriarchy, because the patriarchy can't survive without having an enemy. And so instead of directly fighting with that's a kind of an archaic term today, the patriarchy, and yet they still have the controlling interest. However, what I watched in the Black Lives Matters, I mean, I'm old and crippled, and I have to watch everything on the screen. I can't go out and do it anymore. But what I saw was in the 60s and 70s, the women's movement was in its own silo. The black civil rights were in their silo. The anti-war was in their silo. The farmers, field workers were in their silo. Everybody had their own silo. But what I watched in the Black Lives Matter is through the decades, those silo walls have gone, and we just intermingle with each other all over the place. And there is no way for the patriarchy to fight against that. And they are accustomed to us coming to them and calling them names from way back when. And when we stopped doing it, they thought, oh, we won. And what we did was we went away from their fort and gathered together and started making this new way of being in the world, which is way more humane than it's ever been before. And I am so happy to see that. And I see it in your show. I see it in the people that come to your show. I see that formation of the human bonds rather than the old archaic outside of the personhood structure for how we're supposed to relate. But I see people relating human to human to human. And I really enjoy that.
I love what you had to say, Peggy. And let me tell you, let me elevate that one other step. You know, I go to the Netroots Nation and some other progressive conferences every year. And it's interesting that you see that conglomeration of these different groups that you're talking about. And that's exactly many of our outtakes and many of our plenaries. That is something that's been spoken about. Now, I didn't, when I spoke about white women, the idea wasn't disparaging. The idea was that in order for us to get the numbers to not allow a Donald Trump in there, that's the last bastion that we need to crack as far as women who vote Republican. I know it's a Republican and Democratic patriarchy as well. I mean, let's not fool ourselves. Patriarchy
Correct. Both sides. Yeah.
But but having to get her there, the woman who will sit on top of, to put it bluntly, sort of on top of the patriarchy, right?
Well, what she will do is she will crack the patriarchy open in a way that it's never been cracked open before.
Exactly.
And I'm really delighted that there is a biracial woman.
Yes.
Up against Donald Trump, who ultimately was the patriarch in his family, was the patriarch in his business, and thinks he can be patriarch of the country. And I think she's going to win.
Oh, I know she's going to win. And let me tell you, Peggy, I want to play another video, but I want to say that thank you so kindly for elevating this discussion, because this is what a lot of us needed to hear. And I want everybody in the chat to give a big clap to Sister Peggy Lopez for that commentary that we just heard. Thank you, sis.
However, I am hedging my bets, and I'm leaving for Mexico on the 1st. I already voted yesterday, and just in case I'm wrong.
Well, Peggy, you're not wrong, but we'll talk. We'll talk. Okay. I don't know. Maybe if you have internet in Mexico, we can bring you into the show directly from Mexico. All right.
Okay. We'll see what we can work out.
Have a good one now. Peace.
Thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.